Alright, so if you're like me and you're trying to run, like let's say, in this case, it's a 5-liter EFI in a truck, so F-150, Econoline, and it's OBD1, so you only have one sensor. You may still need to run a wideband. The wideband is going to have that figure, I can't remember the actual range now that I think about it. Like, here it is. Yeah, like 10 to 20 so a 10 to 0 ratio to like a 20 to 0 ratio, or 19 to 98. My cat just jumped in a vertical box. So the thing is that I was thinking about when doing this was I was under the assumption that my factory loom on the right bank would be able to hook into it, and you could see on the diagram here you have your gauge harness, let me see here, your gauge harness, your power, and then there is an analog output, which I assumed is a way to splice it into the factory loom, but I've read otherwise. And then you have your actual sensor harness, in this case just a typical Bosch O2 sensor. This wideband kit, this isn't the actual gauge. I'm kind of sad that you couldn't see. I'll show what type of gauge that is. It's not far from me. But this is actually the Evo series, so it looks something like that. With the premium has ability to like set peaks, which I think is really cool. Is what's a warning, or excuse me, what's a gauge without like a warning light or a warning? This also has a chime. I just thought these kind of looked cool, and they reminded me of the late 80s, early 90s Ford digital gauges, especially in green, like my original Thunderbird. So I have 3 of those so far that are matching. So that's what this actual product is. Pro Sport has decent reviews, so I want to assume it's quality. Obviously, one of the most important things is just the quality of the O2 sensor, which in this case it's a Bosch, which is pretty common, but I think that's no big deal. So I ran into an issue where I was kind of thinking about it, and luckily the advantage of having a V8 engine and having 2 banks is my solution is simply this. Instead of running, adjust the camera a little bit. So let's see here. So right bank, left bank. This is an awful drawing, oh my god. So that'll be our right bank exhaust manifolds. Okay, so from the factory there's going to be an O2 sensor right here feeding the ECM to be able to work those tables of like how much fuel to deliver. In my case, I do have a computer chip, so it shouldn't be a big deal with, you know, a lot more oxygen potentially coming through than what it's used to. So I couldn't figure out with this kit, like, oh, they're looking at the wires like, oh, there's green, brown, yellow, whatever. If there was a way to where you're running the O2 not only to the ECM but also to the gauge, and I couldn't find it out. So what's my solution? Simple. Just run a second O2 sensor. So sensor 1, sensor 2. Sensor 1 is going to feed my ECM, CPU, whatever you want to call it. and help with the running of the actual engine. Sensor 2 on the left bank now is basically running to this kit. So that's going to tell me if I'm, 14.1 or 14.3, but that's basically going to tell me if I'm stoic or stoich, however you want to say it. But the cool thing is anything going on the left bank is completely deaf and dumb to what's going on the right bank. So two completely different systems. Something else to note is, they do actually show that here, as far as your actual angle is like, if you have to install fresh bungs, there's two things to note. Is here are your collectors, which I'm just going to draw as like a cluster of pipes. God, my drawing today, even my thinking, I can't speak fast enough or something. So the thing with location is, if it's an upstream system like my truck is, you're basically going to have your reducer here that comes off of the ball flange of the header here. Of course that's bent, I've still got to fix that. Basically two things are important. Is number one, you don't want the bung too close to one of the primaries. I wonder if I can show that in camera. So if you could see all four of those primaries, is you don't want the bung reading just one. You want it kind of in the middle, but also at least like 18 to 24 inches from your cats. So if you are running cats, which you should be, this here needs to be 18 to 24 inches. But the bung should be far enough away from the collector to be, not collecting just from one primary, so that the center of the center is reading your oxygen levels for all of the primaries. And in this case for both banks, because I don't have the factory reducer or anything, so I do have to start fresh with both banks. But on top of that, this also needs to be 10 degrees from your center. So let's say this is your center. You would have to calculate the radius, like in this case 2.5 inches. There's a formula to get this figure, but it's basically going to be like 10 degrees off of that center. So basically if you have a circle, here's your center, and then here is 10 degrees. So it's kind of hard to tell, it just looks like a crooked 100. But 10 degrees from center. And then you're going to weld that bung in. You're going to need like a step drill bit, and that's going to weld into the reducer. So a typical reducer is probably going to be toward the end, but when you're setting up your cats, and even if you're running catless, even if those are mufflers, it's going to be about like 18 to 24 inches before that. So that's basically my plan, without splicing any wires, without screwing up the factory loom, so that I can get information so that if it's lean, I can either, basically the control that I have over this, like, yeah, there's timing adjustments and so on, but basically my reading from my gauge is going to tell me to open or close my adjustable fuel pressure regulator. So lean or rich. Based on the wideband. Man, I've got to get outside. It's a nice day. But I just thought I'd make that video to give someone else a shortcut if they're trying to like figure out if you bought a wideband or know that you need a wideband, especially for like speed density tuning, whether you have a chip or not, is that to me is the like, yeah, you have to weld two bungs in. But that to me was the smartest way to do it, is just make your gauge blind to the computer, leave everything on the right bank alone, and just plug that in as you normally would the factory system. And I guess that wraps it up for that.